Irving Wallace was an American best-selling author and screenwriter. Wallace was known for his heavily researched novels, many with a sexual theme. One critic described him as the most successful of all the many exponents of junk fiction, perhaps because he took it all so seriously, not to say lugubriously. Better source needed. Wallace was a blue-collar writer who wrote for a blue-collar audience. Most critics were scornful of his novels' flat prose and pedestrian characters. Better source needed. Wallace's name is not to be found in directories of writers, but he possessed the skill to entertain millions, and he was seldom pretentious about it. Better source needed. Early life. Wallace was born in Chicago, Illinois to Betty Liss and Alexander Wallace. The family was Jewish and originally from Russia. Wallace was named after his maternal grandfather, a bookkeeper and Talmudist scholar of Naruka. Wallace grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where he attended Kenosha Central High School. He was the father of Olympic historian David Woliczynski and author Amy Wallace. Career. Wallace began selling stories to magazines when he was a teenager. In the Second World War, Wallace served in the Frank Capra unit in Fort Fox along with Theodore Seuss Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, and continued to write for magazines. He also served in the 1st Motion Picture Unit of the Army Air Force. Soon, however, Wallace turned to a more lucrative job as a Hollywood screenwriter. He collaborated on such films as The West Point Story, Split Second, Meet Me at the Fair, and The Big Circus. He also contributed 3 scripts to the Western television program Have Guns, Will Travel. After an unsatisfying stint in Hollywood, he devoted himself full-time to writing books. He published his first nonfiction work in 1955, The Fabulous Originals, and his first fiction offering, The Sins of Philip Fleming, in 1959. The latter, ignored by critics, was followed by the enormously successful The Chapman Report. Wallace published 33 books during his lifetime, translated into 31 languages. Irving Wallace was married to Sylvia Wallace, a former magazine writer and editor. Her first novel, The Fountains, was an American bestseller and published in 12 foreign editions. Her second novel, Empress, was published in 1980. She also helped him to produce, along with their 2 children, The Book of Lists No. 2 and The Intimate Sex Lives of Famous People. In her autobiography, Amy Wallace wrote that her mother's contributions were not always helpful and the atmosphere not always harmonious. Sylvia Wallace died October 20, 2006, at the age of 89. Several of Wallace's books have been made into films. Among his best-known books are The Chapman Report, The Prize, The Word and The Fan Club. Michael Korda and Peter Schwed were the editors for Wallace at Simon & Schuster. Korda described that Wallace invented a style of novel that is at once a strong story and encyclopedia, with some sex thrown in to keep the reader's pulse going. Wallace loved and championed the underdog. He enjoyed writing the stories of outsiders, which interests saw light in the square pegs. Some Americans who dared to be different. With his son, daughter and wife he produced some notable nonfiction works, including 3 editions each of the People's Almanac and the Book of Lists. Many of the odd facts Wallace uncovered he also used in his novels. In 1976, he placed an advertisement in the Times for "Listomaniacs Wanted. Are you interested in the odd and the curious? If so, we'd love to hear from you." The plea was seen by musician Dave Arthur, the husband of Tony Arthur, the Play School presenter. He told his friend Jeremy Beadle, who sent off some suggestions, among them 20 great events that happened in the bathtub, and people who died on the toilet. He received a phone call from Rosalind Toland, who had been appointed the London editor of what was to be the Book of Lists. She gave Beadle Wallace's telephone number, and Beadle spoke to Wallace and Woliczynski for some hours. He said of the thousands of respondents they had received, Beadle's ideas were the most outstanding. Beadle later became London editor of the People's Almanac No. 2. Bibliography. Novels: The Sins of Philip Fleming, a compelling novel of one man's intimate problem. The Chapman Report. The Prize. The Man. The Three Sirens. The Plot. The 7 Minutes. The Word. The Fan Club. The R Document. The Pigeon Project. The Second Lady. The Almighty. The Miracle. The Seventh Secret. The Celestial Bed. The Golden Room. The Guest of Honor. Nonfiction: The Fabulous Originals. Lives of extraordinary people who inspired memorable characters in fiction. The Square Pegs. Some Americans Who Dared to Be Different. The Fabulous Showman. The Life and Times of P.T. Barnum. The 27th Wife. The Sunday Gentleman. The Writing of One Novel. The Nympho and Other Maniacs. The Lives, the Loves and the Sexual Adventures of Some Scandalous and Liberated Ladies. The People's Almanac. Stardust to Prairie Dust. The Book of Lists. The Two. The Biography of the Original Siamese Twins. The People's Almanac No. 2. The Book of Lists No. 2. The People's Almanac No. 3. The Intimate Sex Lives of Famous People. The Book of Lists No. 3. Significa.